Hi. How are you?
I'm good. Happy Monday.
Oh gosh, yeah. Is it Monday? I thought it was like, of course, because it's Mental Health Monday, but it just feels like it's been such a long week already.
I know. My space-time continuum is all discombobulated from the holiday.
Oh my goodness. And holiday season is not over.
No, it's not. I always tell people holiday season when you work in mental health is like tax season for accountants. You know, it's the it's the busiest time of the year. It is not the most wonderful time of the year, but it is the busiest.
And then also like resolution season.
Yeah. And then the shame from breaking resolution season.
So pretty much it's like always tax season for you.
It's all good. I can talk about that any time of the year.
So can you give a little, I'm so excited to finally meet you.
I know. I feel like I know. It's so funny with Instagram. I used to be such a snot about like online friends, but I have met the coolest, most amazing people who have become my dearest friends through Instagram. Like, who knew?
I know. I also thought it was like weird, but now I met so many people that I absolutely love. It's crazy. Like there's so many amazing people out there. Who knew?
Right? And the best conversations and smart people. I love reading what people are talking about. So yay Instagram, yay social media can be used for good and not for evil. So what did you want me to talk about again?
Okay, well first, can you just give us a little bit of a background about you and what you do? And
yeah, so hi, I'm Britt Frank, and I am a psychotherapist and recovering hot mess. I didn't actually start out as a therapist. I started out in advertising and media and just random jobs, just trying to figure out what was what, and just kind of messing up and banging my head on life. And then eventually I found a therapist who was a somatic experiencing practitioner, which is what we'll be talking about. And working with her for, I don't know, 5-10 years, over the course of that time. P.S. It's not going to take you 5-10 years to work on your trauma. At the time, though, it was all kind of new, and I got better. And I just became so passionate about this work because knowing the mind-body connection and understanding that trauma is not in our minds, it's in our bodies, and anxiety is not in our minds, it's in our bodies. It changes lives. And so all I wanted to do was talk about this and read about this. And so I just switched careers and sort of pivoted midstream. And now this is what I do. And I love it so, so, so much.
wow, amazing. And it's such a fascinating topic. I'm also obsessed with reading about trauma. I know it's like really, I've talked about it on our lives before, but I'm quite fascinated about, like, it's incredible.
It's so fascinating. And, you know, I always take it with some humility because, you know, nobody was talking about trauma however many years ago. And now, like, even therapists don't have to be trauma trained to practice therapy, which just blows my mind. Like, that's just insane to me. But, you know, everything that we're learning about the brain, I hold really lightly because who knows in 10 years what new stuff they're going to come out. So the information out now is good and it's solid and it changes lives and it changes stories. And who knows what we'll discover in the next 10, 20, 30 years.
It's amazing. Yeah, so I mean, what we're going to be talking about is kind of how our body holds trauma. A few people messaged in, how do you know if it's trauma? You know, because I mean, the truth is, I used to get like I mean, I still do get back pains because and if somebody asked me if I was an anxious person, I would say, no, I'm so chill, you know, like I'm not a very anxious person, but I am an anxious person because it's in my body.
And I want to start out, and Peter Levine, who's like the founder of Somatic Experiencing, and he's one of the pioneering gurus in the field, and he says this all the time. So I really want to just bracket everything that we're talking about with, if you have a physical anything, go to the doctor first. Like, go to the real doctor, the physician, the MD, and you always want to, always want to rule out medical. So I never, ever say to a client or a friend or anybody, oh, well, this is trauma. This, you know, sometimes a virus is a virus, and sometimes a broken leg, and sometimes a backache is a backache. So, you know,
that's an important point.
Yeah. Always go to the doctor. I mean, not everyone has access to physicians, and I get that. But I would tell anybody coming in to work on somaticized or body-oriented trauma or anxiety or whatever, always rule out like medical stuff first. Then we can work on the whole feelings, emotions, other stuff. So I really, really respect, I know there's a lot of debate about, well, Western medicine is bullshit, da, da, da. Western medicine is great and it saves lives. And like in any fields, there are good people doing great work and bad people doing shitty work. Rule out medical before you are working on the psych component. Okay, that's my big disclaimer with everything we're going to talk about. Yeah.
Okay. Everyone heard that?
Go to the doctor first. Yes.
Okay.
So do you want me to jump into that question or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's as good as of a place to start as any, right?
Okay.
Like, how would you know? Besides for going to the doctor.
Right. Well, let's start by, we've ruled out medical. So you've gone to the doctor, it's not medical, great. So the very first thing we need to do is define, well, what is trauma? Because a lot of people get I don't have trauma. I had a great childhood and I had good parents and nothing bad ever happened to me. And that's great. We're not looking to, create this false narrative of an evil family of origin. So trauma, as it's defined, is anything that is too much, too fast, too soon. So any data coming at you that is too much, too fast, too soon for your brain to process can be, not that it's going to be traumatizing, but it can be traumatizing. So that definition can include anything. I might not think that moving 20 times should be traumatic, but to my brain, which is not habituated to understand multi-city moves, that could be trauma. That could be traumatic. Divorces, job loss, illnesses, secondary trauma, which is if you have a friend and bad stuff is happening to your friends, that actually can impact you and cause you to be experiencing secondary trauma. So we really want to let go of the story that trauma is something horrible happened to you. Obviously, yes, but that's not always the case. So if people are listening and they're like, well, I don't know if I have trauma, the best way to figure out, do you have trauma, is, are you happy? Can you relax? How's your sleep? Do you feel like you're living your best, most awesome life? Can you chill when you want to chill? Can you be active when you want to be active? And if you're constantly lethargic and just sluggish and you want to be up, or if you're constantly up and you want to be down, chances are that there's some trauma floating around in there.
Yeah.
How's that for definition?
That's perfect.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, so let's say you've gone to the doctor, you have trauma. So how do you get curious and, kind of figure out, where to go from there? I mean, I guess you would go to the therapist, but like, let's say somebody went to a non-trauma informed therapist.
Sorry.
No, because that I've actually spoken to people that have gone to a therapist for like 10 years and they're kind of like quite a few people, and they're like in the same place over and over and over again. And then, kind of that there's some underlying trauma. So then where do you go from there? And
where to start? If you see me, I'm playing with this stuff, which is called Mad Matter, and it's like kinetic sand.
I love that.
And these lives make me nervous, so I have to have like fidgety things to like mess around with. So that's what this is. So, talking about trauma doesn't heal trauma. It's important to talk about trauma. It's important to have a dialogue about trauma. But if talking about our crap fixed us, no one would need a therapist. You don't need to pay somebody to sit and rehash all your stories. Now, that said, there is some value in having somebody witness your story. So, for example, if someone has never been able to speak out loud about something that happened to them as a child, it can be really healing to have that story witnessed. However, you do not need to retell your story to heal it. And frankly, half of the crap that we experience as humans happens before we even have words. So, you're not going to be able to tell the story of what happened when you were 6 months old. And that's what's so encouraging about knowing that trauma is a body thing, is your body will always hold on to the stories that your brain either forgot, can't remember, or didn't have the structure to, create memories for. And so not everyone has access to therapists. So the first place to start, well, in my opinion, and everything that I say, take what's useful, leave what's not. the two books that are sort of my go-to Bibles for this work are The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk. Oh, like where was that
Best
book?
book ever.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And Waking the Tiger by Peter.
Oh, I think I just ordered that on Amazon.
Yeah. So good. Now I'm going to throw just, I know you and I didn't talk about this, but I just got finished with level 1 internal family systems training.
Love.
Now it's not necessarily focused on the body, but it's just as important. And so that's Richard Schwartz. And so get all their books, and read them if you can. Watch their podcasts, watch things on YouTube with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they are so great books. Oh, yes, thank you. Unspoken Voice, How the Body Restores Trauma. That's
there's also a book called Self Therapy on IFS.
Yes.
So that's really good for it's really good for people who don't have access to therapy. And then there's also a workbook that you can order.
Yes, and then Frank Anderson wrote an internal family systems workbook, which is awesome. And like you said, there are great therapists that aren't trauma trained, and you do what you can with that. But some of the best resources are things that you can actually do for yourself at home. Would it be ideal for everyone to have a trauma trained therapist in body modalities? Like, sure, but it's not hopeless if you don't have access to one. So these resources are amazing. Another one is the book It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolynn, Whlynn. And that book is about epigenetic trauma, which is how your family trauma passes through your DNA, through the physiology.
Intergenerational trauma. That's like my favorite topic.
What type of trauma does someone need to be in therapy for? Hello, Bride 00007. Anything that causes you to not feel like you are doing life on your terms, where your choices, that counts. You don't have to have comparing trauma is just pointless. I saw a meme on Instagram. What did it say? It was, drowning in 7 inches of water is the same thing as drowning in 7 feet of water. At the end of the day, drowning is drowning. So there's no point in comparing trauma. If your life's not working, that's reason enough to be in therapy. But you don't have to. You don't want to.
That's a great point.
But you don't need to have a big giant thing happen to justify getting therapy or getting help.
Oh, thanks, Nechama Cats. We love you too. So this is actually why Bride 07 loves you.
Love you too.
Okay, so this is actually, I think we talked about this like a long time ago when we first talked about the trauma that happens in your body when you've gone through physical trauma, like surgeries so how does that impact your mental health?
Yeah, this one's so fascinating, learning about medical induced trauma. Now, this is not anti-medicine, like a lot of surgeries are necessary and they're life-saving and we need to do them. But the first time I heard about this was learning that children who are intubated will often present with symptoms of sexual abuse, even if nothing happened to them. So again, think about, what is intubation? I'm not anti-intubation, by the way, for doctors and nurses, but you're a child, you're immobilized, right? So all of a sudden you've been injected with things that force you to not be able to move. You're laying on a table and objects are going into your body and they're penetrating you. To your brain, that often will land as we're being sexually abused, and then symptoms of sexual abuse will. So my very first question with people who are like, I have all of these symptoms, I meet all the criteria for sexual abuse, but nothing happened to me. I'm sure nothing happened to me. My very first question is, were you ever under anesthesia? Have you ever had a surgery? Because invasive medical procedures can be mistaken by our brains as sexual trauma. Like, wow.
Even as infants?
Oh, yeah.
So then how do you process, how does that work even?
It's like, well, great, is everything going to fuck us up now? Like, this can mess us. And it's like, okay, so yes, everything has the potential to be traumatic. That does not mean that every time someone has surgery, they're going to be traumatized. We're just making room for the definition to include more than I was assaulted, attacked in a war, or survived, a natural disaster. So it's really important to know these things can be traumatic, but they are not necessarily always traumatic.
Right.
So as an infant, if you are taken away from your mother because you need to be in the NICU, even though your mother's not doing anything wrong, you need to be in the NICU. What we know about attachment and bonding is that infant, unless you have a trauma-informed parent who, has been given the resources to do this, that infant will often display symptoms later on in life because of a faulty attachment wiring, which again is no one's fault. That's not a parent's fault. But we're not equipping, as the mental health field goes, we're not equipping people to understand that this is a thing. So, Peter Levine also wrote a book called Trauma Proofing Your Kids. So if you have kids and you're worried that they're getting all screwed up, that's a great book for how to work with after medical procedures, how to prep the kids for before and after. In infants, how to use skin to skin contact and how to do things like that. But it's so amazing to know that our brains are brilliant, but they're not necessarily smart enough to know, oh, this is, a scope or a catheter, not somebody is invading my body.
That's wow. So somebody said, how do you process being intubated and tips for healing post-NICU trauma?
So there's a lot of different ways. So IFS, which is internal family system, the way that IFS would approach intubation would be to recognize that it is a part of you that was traumatized, not the whole, right? I have this infant part of me that experienced this thing, and IFS walks you through. I mean, I'm not going to be able to break down every nuance of it, but just the general gist is you separate self from part. I, Britt, I'm safe, I'm fine, I'm grown, I'm good. I have a part of me that is still locked in space and time where scary things are happening. And IFS has a protocol where you kind of go back in and you retrieve what they call retrieval, retrieving that part and then working with the memories, sort of re-encode how the memory is stored in the brain so it doesn't have the charge attached to it. It's brilliant. So that would be IFS's approach. And then
IFS, we have somebody talking about IFS next week.
Yes, and Schwartz, Esther. Yes, I know. I love IFS too. IFS total game. And IFS and somatic experiencing are such a beautiful pairing because somatic experiencing would take the experience of being intubated and we would slow down. And as the person's talking about the experience, we'd get curious about whatever body sensations are showing up. And as those body sensations begin to show up, then we start to work with, what was incompleted. If a person didn't get to fight, then we might need to push on things or we might need to pull on things. So somatic experiencing is a lot of, I push furniture around my office and we're really working with proprioception and with understanding what it feels like to pull or to push, because those are the things that didn't get to happen.
Wow.
It's cool. Yeah.
That does sound cool.
The Kosher Contessa. I love your Instagram name. That's awesome. How could a person heal a trauma which they don't remember? IFS wouldn't be able to help this.
Yeah.
Yes and no, right? Because IFS might not be able to help with what's called explicit memory. So if you don't have a story attached to it, so, if you were 2 months old and something happened, but our brains will create pictures, they'll create images. I might not have a story, but as I'm working with a young part, all of a sudden I might feel shaking in my body. I might feel fear in my stomach. I might feel constriction in my throat. I don't know the why there, but it doesn't matter. You don't need to know why. I just know there are unpleasant sensations that are causing me to feel fear, and then you can work with it that way. So IFS can work. It's a different, you have to go at it a bit more creatively.
So I'm still so curious about this, healing. So is IFS the go-to for that kind of thing, or are there other methods that would also work for that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I go to IFS. For me, IFS is my first go-to just because I'm so in love with the model. I think everything about it is just brilliant and gorgeous and elegant and in line with the science. However, IFS is one, somatic experiencing is another, EMDR works with the brain and the body. Sensory motor psychotherapy is another one. I don't know a ton about those because I'm not certified in them, but any of these types of therapy that recognize your body is holding on to stuff, and when bad shit happens and you can't remember it, your body will send signals, either through uncomfortable sensations or chronic pain. There's a condition called psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, which are your body will actually have what looks like a seizure, but there's actually no medical origin for it whatsoever. And that's a trauma response in the body. I've worked with it. Fascinating way our bodies try to help us process through, but it's a terrifying condition for people that don't know what to do or how to work with it. Yes, definitely good with PTSD and depression. So I would say, you know, in my opinion, but do your thing, that IFS and SC are my top two. EMDR and sensory motor psychotherapy, those are great. And there's more, but anything, what you're looking for when you're doing the research is, does it recognize the body's participation in the story? You can't just think your way out of trauma, because trauma is not stored in the thinking part of the brain. So thinking your way out of trauma would be like, you know, you and I are sitting here talking about my garage. Like, oh my God, my garage is so messy. My garage is so messy. I just want my garage to be clean. It's like, well, it's not going to get clean until I go in that room and clean it. So trying to think your way out of trauma is like, you got to get into the right room.
You're trying to like will your garage to be clean without you actually putting the effort in.
Right. I'm in the wrong room. Right now I'm in my living room.
Right. Okay.
Go to the garage. So these therapies help you get to the room, so to speak, where all the crap is happening. And
there's another book about that. What's it called? Something about like the rooms in the house.
There is. I don't know that one.
Oh, no, I forget what it's called. Oh, my friend told me about it, and it's kind of like IFS, but it's like compartmentalizing like in different rooms.
I love that.
Yeah. It sounds cool. I have to find out.
When you find it, send it to me.
So somebody said, is there a possibility to be fully healed from many traumatic experiences?
Okay. So what does it mean to be fully healed? That's a really important question. Do we ever get fully healed from anything? Like as a human, we're constantly, you know, it's tough out there and shit happens, and, you know, relationships can harm us and they can heal us. So is it possible be fully healed where you're walking around in a body that has no issues? Not so much. Is it possible to have tons of trauma happen to you and then you can become symptom free from those traumas? Absolutely. 100%. Like 100%.
That's good to know.
Which is really good news. Now, does that mean everything's perfect? No. You know, for me, I've experienced lots of traumas of all different kinds. There are certain things that I have to maintenance more than people who don't have those traumas need to do. You know, there are practices I have to do and therapy that I work on. But do I walk around every day feeling like I'm going to die, or that I need to do drugs to cope, or that I need to restrict food or binge on or whatever? Yes, I've had an eating disorder and drug addiction and all kinds of crap. I don't struggle with those things on the daily like I used to. So yes.
So there's hope.
Healing is absolutely possible.
So someone else said, I'm trying to find someone that has a parent that murdered their other parent. I haven't been able to find a support group, and that's a huge trauma, trying to find support.
Yeah, that sounds like a really hard thing to try to, that's, you know, one of those types of things that, one, not everyone talks about, and two, it's going to be really hard to find people willing to talk about it and who understand that. I wish I had a resource to help. But yeah, that's a huge trauma. Absolutely. Oh, this is a good question. Who is that? The DBT question. Where did it go? Before or after body focused trauma, if at all? Okay, I'm really glad. Sorry, I lost your name. The whole thing scrolled away. But so DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy, skills-based therapy. Now, if someone is, I'll use myself for example. So let's say I'm smoking meth every day and every single thing is tripping me out and I'm experiencing symptoms of borderline personality disorder. Like, yes, all that happened. And there's no way I'm going to be able to do body focused trauma because I'm so lacking in skills and I'm so lacking in coping that everything is going to trigger. It's kind of like being a burn victim. every single thing is going to trigger the shit out of me, and I'm going to be on a cycle. So yeah, DBT, which is not body focused, can help at least ground you in, and I've done DBT. It's really good for grounding you in skills, getting some habits built, getting you used to connecting with other people, making crisis phone calls, taking charge of the symptoms. And then, so yes, sometimes DBT is something that has to happen prior to body focused trauma therapy. It's a really, really good question.
So you think that DBT should be done before?
That should. I don't like should. But often it's important, because if someone cannot tolerate their organism at all, then there's no point in digging into it, because it's just going to trigger a spiral. So for someone that's in active addiction, or is actively self-harming, or is actively in the midst of an eating disorder, I would always suggest DBT first, or in tandem.
That's so interesting.
I shouldn't say always. I won't say always. Because sometimes IFS people have really great results with that. But I do think that the skills of DBT are really important as a foundation. So you can do it that way.
That's so interesting. Someone else asked, what do people misunderstand most about trauma?
Oh, that's a great question. I love your people. Like I like totally lurk on your Instagram page. Like, you have the best conversations happening on your page. So the most misunderstood thing about trauma is that it's not that some people have it and some people don't. So the most misunderstood thing about trauma is that we all have it. You have it. I have it. We all have it to some degree. It's on a continuum. And I'm not saying everyone's traumas are equal, but if you have a pulse and you were born, you have trauma. Period. Doesn't mean you have to be in therapy. Not everyone needs to do therapy. Not everyone needs to do these things, but everybody has trauma. Everyone's nervous system has been overwhelmed by, think about how we're born, like we come shooting out of a woman's vagina, or out, any other way. That's traumatic. Adolescence, our body's changing. That's traumatic. Growing up is traumatic. So I would say that's the biggest misconception. It's not if you have trauma, it's what type do you have, and to what degree, and does it need to be addressed?
And are there people, so if everybody has trauma, are there kind of tools that you could teach early on in order to spare the hardships of trauma, or is it just something that you have to kind of live with and deal with? And
oh God, no, that sounds terrible. We're not a trauma-informed society. IFS has a kid's book, which I wish to God somebody had given me when I was little, which is called, I think the book's called Polly and Her Parts. And
oh my goodness.
Have you heard of that book before?
No.
Fantastic. And I do kids therapy, and in working with kids, they're so they get it. You don't have to explain to them you're not schizophrenic, but you have a part of you that thinks this and a part of you that thinks that. They get it. And so when trauma happens, it's if children know that there's a part of me that's afraid, but I also have a part of me that knows how to ask for help, and there's another part of me that wants to do really, really bad things, but I have another part that knows here's how we make choices, and here's how I can help the scared parts of me feel better. It's an incredibly empowering way of working. So half of the dilemma with trauma symptoms are people don't know that that's what they're experiencing. No, you're not crazy. This is a thing, right? You're not mentally ill, and there's nothing wrong with mental illness, but a lot of the stuff is actual physiological injury that can be healed.
Everybody keeps asking for the book, so maybe we'll compile a list afterwards, and we can post it on our stories or something.
Yeah, and I have a book list on my website too, so I can give a link to that. It's Britt's Bookshelf on thegreenhousekc.com.
Perfect.
I don't think I have Polly and Her Parts on there though. I will add that.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited. I love when I find children's books that are, because I feel like sometimes what I've actually told people about self-therapy before the book, and I feel like a lot of people just can't get through it. But if there was a kids version, like even adults could benefit, right?
So much so. And I use kids book, I use kids therapy on adults. I use kids books. I like to play. It's a lot easier to fuck around with sand than talk about your feelings. So, when I'm the client in therapy with my therapist, I always need to be like manipulating something or whatever. There's also a great book. I did an Instagram post a few weeks ago on just what are your favorite book resources, and there are like 300 comments of amazing books on there. So
oh wow, okay.
It's somewhere in the grid there.
I want to hear a little bit more about what you just said about having fun and doing, because that is part of somatic experience, right? Is play and fun. And
yes, but don't get freaked out if you're like, because I actually did not become a play therapist because I loved kids. Like everyone's like, oh, you must love kids so much. I'm like, no, I didn't understand them. I didn't understand how to play. Nothing was fun. I was an old soul at 5, and I wanted to learn, how do children process the world, because we treat them like they're either dolls, objects, or like little mini grown-ups. And knowing how kids process the world is so important for us as adults, because we have childlike parts that are still in there and still processing. So there is a lot of play in somatic work, but for people for whom play is dangerous, terrifying, and anxiety inducing, I don't say that. I'm just like, we do what feels safest. If you don't feel safe to play, then we're not going to play.
Well, so there are adults that, so is part of the therapy getting them to experience childlike play, or no, it will always feel dangerous to them, so you avoid that?
Part of the benefit of doing somatic or body focused therapy is your capacity to play is restored. It sort of just comes back online. Like I still have issues with something. Like I won't, if there's a room full of people dancing, like all my parts are like, no, do not engage. But play is so much easier for me now than it used to be. It used to be impossible. So the capacity for play becomes restored. I hated play therapy. Yeah, it can be really tough. The capacity for joy is restored. So if you think about a nervous system that's experienced trauma, is always going to be on the hunt for danger. Our brains are not wired to make us happy and lighthearted and joyful. Our brains are wired to keep us from getting attacked by lions, tigers, and bears. So a brain that's stuck on trauma is going to be constantly scanning the environment looking for danger. It's impossible to play if you're constantly thinking you're about to get eaten by a tiger. So one of the benefits of somatic work is it helps your nervous system register, oh, we're safe. We're actually not about to be attacked. So it's safe to play. It's safe to explore. Safe to do whatever it is that we want to do.
Can somebody who had a very playful childhood and very like a relatively easy childhood, but then as an adult experience trauma, could that make them like inhibit in the same way as a child? Like could they kind of like go back? I don't know if I'm saying that.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. So someone, let's say they grew up and they had a good childhood and they were happy, but then let's say in college they were assaulted and now everything is shut down and they can't play at all. And it's like their happy childhood is not accessible, right? And so what that is, that's would be described as a nervous system in a state of freeze. So, when our body is overwhelmed, we'll go into fight, flight, or freeze. Or the fawn is the people-pleasing one, but that's like a whole nother thing. So when our body is overwhelmed and it shuts down, we do freeze up and nothing is accessible to us. All we know is we have to survive this. And that's a lot of what depression is a freeze response. But we miss the freeze and we focus on the depression. And it's great to focus on the depression. Take meds, do your thing, do whatever you want. But depression, if you think of what it means to be depressed, it's a mechanism. Depression, a tongue depressor. It doesn't make your tongue sad and cry. A tongue depressor pushes it down. So depression is your body constricting. And Deb Dana has this awesome thing called the polyvagal ladder. And it's a really simple just visual for how to picture, depression is shut down at the bottom of the ladder to feeling awesome and socially engaged, able to interact with the world at the top of the ladder.
Hmm. Hold on, I think we missed a few.
I'm so bad at reading and talking and trying to figure out where to look at the same time.
Oh, massage therapy used to terrify me, but those are the ones that work for me now. It's painful because the emotional pain it brings up. Tips for fawn?
So for the people pleasing response, well, for the purpose of just this conversation, it can be helpful to know that often people pleasing is not a character defect, and there's nothing wrong with you, and you're not a weak person if you're always giving in to people. Fawn is really a way of surviving. If our body thinks that the fastest way to get through something is to just go along with it, that's not the same as consent. And this happens a lot with sexual assault survivors. And I count myself as one of them. So I do understand this from the inside out. I'm going to go along with this because it's the fastest way to get through it. I can get this over with faster if I don't fight than if I fight and scream and kick. So I'm not going to. I'm just going to get through it, and then it'll be done, and then I'll be alive. That is not the same thing as consent. Now, in the eyes of the law, that's a different story. But in terms of trauma and psychology and your brain development, fawn is I'm going to say yes and go along with it because it's the only way I'm going to get through this unscathed. So it is absolutely a survival response. So does that answer how to deal with it? No, but it does give you a place to start. It's not weakness to be a people pleaser. It's a survival adaptation that can be healed with the right tools and resources.
How about agoraphobia?
That one will be kind of a case-by-case basis. So agoraphobia, you could take 10 people with agoraphobia, and there's 10 different stories and 10 different reasons why, which would make 10 different interventions. So, it's a fear response. And when you try to go out, your nervous system goes into freeze. So the therapy for that would really depend upon the person and their story and what's going on with them. I don't like exposure therapy, and that's where you sort of just like slam dunk into the thing that scares you. I think that kind of traumatizes people, but if that works for you, do your thing. It's just not my particular cup of tea.
So if somebody's experiencing that, would they, do you do therapy online, by the way?
Only in the states where I'm licensed. They're really strict with my licensure that you can't practice where, so like if I'm in Kansas City and you're in California, if I'm not licensed in California, I can't practice there. So no, I cannot practice therapy outside my states, which is unfortunate because the brain is the brain across state lines. But
I know it seems a little weird because I don't know, but I guess
my workarounds for that is that I'll be doing trauma workshops soon, and I am partnered up with Narcinon, which is another Instagram account that focuses specifically on narcissistic abuse, and we're launching an online course in a few weeks. So like classes and groups and workshops and lectures is how I can get around like the state limitations. Oh, they posted a really powerful limitations of 12 steps when it comes to shame and character defects. Are you a licensed therapist? Yes, I am. Shame and character defects. So we can pivot over to the 12. I'm just sort of noodling around. Is that okay? I don't know if you had like a focus you wanted to do, but.
No, this is great. Lots of information.
Cool. So with the 12 steps, and I love the 12 steps. I've worked the 12 steps. The 12 steps are wonderful. However, they're not trauma informed, and they focus heavily on shame and morality. So steps 4 is take a thorough and fearless moral inventory. Step 6 and 7 is about removing defects of character. From an IFS or an SE or a trauma-informed perspective, what you're calling a character defect, I'm calling a survival response. So that doesn't mean that they're good, and it doesn't mean that they're healthy, but it does mean that rather than asking God to remove my character defects, I need to work with my nervous system to understand how did those defects become necessary in the first place, and how can I work with those parts of myself to find healthier ways of coping. But I don't subscribe to character defects and moral failings. Not my thing.
That's, I mean, but it makes sense. I mean, like, why would you fight something that when you can grow with it?
Yeah, and I love, it's such a compassionate way of working, right? So the parts of me that really like drugs and really like doing bad things, I don't get rid of the parts. I have to unburden those parts so they're not carrying around the weight of the world thinking that this is the only way to survive. But the parts are beautiful and they're wonderful and they're so full of richness and they make our lives so much better. I mean, if you think about it, we're all walking around with like 80 personalities on any given day because we all have these subparts. And it's so fast. I get such a kick out of hearing them, you know, I'm like, okay, well, we're not going to do that, but you know, what's bothering you today? And dialoguing with the parts of self is a fascinating way of approaching kind of like the intrapsychic universe.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to scroll back because somebody asked, can you talk about being re-traumatized?
Yeah, well, re-traumatization would be if something bad happens and then the same thing happened or a similar thing happened. So re-traumatized just means your nervous system was overwhelmed again for whatever reason. And re-traumatization can be from being triggered. It could happen from not having that trauma tended to properly the first time. You know, it could happen from witnessing something. So it's not about weakness of character or lack of willpower. Re-traumatization is a physiological thing, not a matter of will. So,
but could you also kind of be re-traumatized by something that's not actually like, let's say something in your brain reminds you of that thing, but it's not actually, like, you're not actually in danger, but something is triggering that same response that you felt about that bigger trauma.
Yeah, a good example of that would be, so let's say as a child, my father, and I'm just making this up. Let's say as a child, my father lost his job. And as a result of him losing his job, he became an alcoholic, he became violent, and he beat my mother, and my life went to shit really fast. Okay. Fast forward, now I'm an adult, and I'm safe, and I have great resources and a supportive family, and everything is awesome. Now let's say I lose my job. Now I'm 45 and I lose my job. I'm okay. You know, I've got connections and friends and I'm fine. However, losing my job could absolutely bring back all of that stuff from my childhood. And then I would experience this job loss as if it were that job loss. So,
oh, wow.
When people say, well, there's no reason for me to be traumatized. Well, you may not know the reason, but let's say that scenario happened when I was an infant. I'm not going to remember that dad lost his job, lost his shit, beat mom and whatever, but my body's going to recall that. So now at 40, I'm losing my job and I don't know why all of a sudden I'm having panic attacks and why I can't sleep at night and whatever. There's always a reason for our symptoms, even if we do not know what it is. Always. Nothing comes from nowhere.
Wow. Yeah. That's a great example.
Yeah. Can you please talk about therapists who don't understand trauma and re-traumatize their clients? That's an important one. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, keep going.
What time is it? How are we doing on time?
You know what? I don't have the time on my phone, so I have no idea.
I don't either. Well, Instagram will cut us off at an hour. I'm trying to like get all of this out there. So therapists who don't understand trauma will almost always re-traumatize their clients, which is not intentional, but it does happen because, you know, the original school of therapy were taught and they're still teaching, you know, you talk about it. Talk about the feelings and you talk about hi, what brings you into therapy? Tell me about all the horrible things that have happened to you. That is not safe, nor is it trauma informed, nor is it helpful. So, and I get with insurance, you have to find out why people are coming in to see you, but therapists who insist that you have to talk about it, therapists who insist that you have to face the thing, therapists who push faster than you're ready, or therapists that say like this is the only way you can do it, will absolutely re-traumatize a client, which is unfortunate.
Wow. I also was talking to
8:44 Central. Hi, Crystal. Thank you.
Actually, I'm not gonna say what I was gonna say.
Okay. Now I'm curious. Tell me more.
No, just that I was talking to somebody about trying to find help for somebody else, and the person had experienced pretty big trauma and they didn't want to go through an intermediary. They wanted to hear from that person. And I didn't think that that was appropriate because there was no reason for if I could fill him in on the information, for her to have to relive all of that, it was a really stressful experience trying to help somebody who it was hard to find them help because anyways, yeah, I'm not going to get into details, but yeah, I think that's when people who are trying to help people are demanding that people reveal all before they help them. I don't think that's helpful. So I think
it's not helpful at all. And the worst word in my, well, not the worst word, one of my pet words that I hear thrown around in the mental health world is resistance. You know, you got to work with clients who are resistant and get them past their resistance. I'm like, well, what if they're resistant because you're not trained to deal with their shit, and their resistance is actually their wisdom because they know excuse me, you're not safe. So I absolutely approach what is traditionally called resistance as something about this situation, something about what's happening now does not feel safe. I also don't take it personally. It's like, for whatever reason, this has not reached what it needs to be in terms of safety. So I get curious about resistance, and I invite it. So if I'm noticing that I'm working with someone and they're really, really not wanting to go somewhere, I'll name it. I'll say, oh my gosh, how awesome is it that you have a part of you that's really preventing you from going down that road? Because
it's the intuition.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
I love it. And the safer you make all of the parts of ourself, the faster they'll open up and let you, because they want help. They don't want to have to do these jobs. But it is our job as the therapist to make you safe, not your job to prove yourself to us or do what we want you to do. That's a bunch of bullshit. So I'm really big on self-advocacy. And, you know, therapists we work for you. So grill us, fire us if we're not working out. You know, do whatever you need to do to be safe. And yeah, and rant. Hashtag rant over.
Somebody else, I love all your posts that validate that classic relaxation techniques, mindfulness, yoga, deep breathing can be re-traumatizing. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah. So nothing against yoga and nothing against mindfulness and nothing against, you know, if like those things are incredibly important practices. So do yoga if it works for you, and do mindfulness and do breathing and do relaxation if you want. It becomes re-traumatizing when you're trying to force breath. So the reason that my breath is constricted when I'm panicking is because that's how my body is trying to conserve energy to keep me alive. So if I tell you, take a deep breath, I'm actually causing you to override what your body is trying to do, which is inherently going to re-traumatize it. So trauma by definition is, you know, one of the definitions is the absence of choice, because if you had a choice, you would have chosen not to have been traumatized. So trauma is not something that you get to pick. It just happens. So part of the healing process needs to be making sure that choice in every form is restored. You get to choose how to breathe. You get to choose how to sit. I'm not going to force you to relax. If you don't feel safe enough to relax, then don't. You know, if you want to curl up in a ball, curl up in a ball. And with somatic work, it's great because we're not trying to create conditions. We're just trying to help the body work through whatever it needs to work through, knowing breath will follow if you feel safe. Relaxation will follow, you know, if you feel safe. But trying to override the process and just get to be real. I mean, how often has this worked? Just calm down. Just get over it. Like, that doesn't work. If that worked, we wouldn't need therapy. Like, no one in the history of anyone ever relaxed by being told to relax.
I think we had a post, that post up somewhere, something like that. There's a lot of questions on this topic. Hold on. Therapists can be very traumatizing, but never there's always one that's a good match for you. It took me 12 years with quite a few tries till I can finally say now that I found my match. It's, yeah. It's like
a therapist is like finding a pair of jeans, you know, like you spend a lot of time crying in the dressing room and you have to try on 100 pairs before you find one that fits. It's not that dissimilar trying to find, you know, I went through a whole bunch of therapists and some really bad ones and some really traumatizing ones before I found someone that got me. And some people are so traumatized by their therapy experience that they don't go back. And I get that. I really do. It's sad, but I totally understand why some people are just like, fuck that. No.
Well, it's not supposed to be fun, right? It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, kind of like if you're trying to deal with stuff, it's not a pleasant experience. But I guess, so how would somebody get over, let's say they were brought to a therapist in childhood and they were traumatized by therapy. So how would, like, is there any advice that you would give to somebody to kind of try it again? Or
yeah, I have a post on my Instagram, like 10 things to ask a potential therapist. So first session should never be you spilling your secrets to somebody that you've never met. You know, your first session should be you grilling the crap out of this person. Now, again, not everyone has access to resources. So if you have, your insurance will only let you see this one person, there's not a whole lot that you can do there. But if you have the ability to choose, which not everyone does, but if you do, go in there and grill them. You know, how do you handle this? How do you handle that? How do you handle resistance? And so I have a post about that.
And then, how do you actually work past a client's resistance?
You don't.
You don't.
You absolutely don't, because we're not the healers. You know, we all are our own healers. Therapist's job is to provide information, tools, resources, and to help guide. But ultimately, you don't work past a client's resistance. You help make safety a thing where the resistance no longer becomes necessary.
Yeah, Schiffer said by inviting curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. Curiosity is usually a good go-to. Whether I saw Crystal, you were asking something about, you know, how to help someone who's panicking. You can't physiologically be curious and panic at the same time. So if someone's panicking and you can get them into like curiosity, then physiologically the panic's going to start to calm down.
Somebody else said not fun is different than traumatic.
Well, yeah, I mean, trauma therapy shouldn't be traumatic. You know, a safe trauma therapist is going to be really unpleasant and unfun. Like, I love my therapist, but I love the process of therapy because it's painful, but it's not traumatic. It's just hard. An unsafe therapist is going to create more trauma versus, it's kind of like going to the gym, you know, like a good workout is going to make you sore, but it's not going to injure you. It's the same thing with therapy. A good trauma therapist is going to work you, but it's not going to create more injury, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. When someone's panicking and you want to help them choose what they need to help themselves.
Mm-hmm. Get them curious. Wow, notice that you're panicking right now. Wow, I wonder where in your body you're feeling that. Can you get curious for a second about this panic and let me know, like, does it have a texture? Does it have a color? What are the qualities of it? Do you feel it in your neck? Do you feel it in your stomach? Because as the person panicking is observing their panic and getting curious about it, the panic will slow down.
And then somebody else said, I often hear people going to therapy and being re-traumatized only to find out that they went to a method and quick fix facilitator. I've never even heard of that. What is that?
I don't know what a quick fix facilitator is. I've never heard of the thing, but there's a lot of, you know, therapists that, again, with insurance restrictions, some therapists will only be able to see you for 3 sessions. Or, you know, if you're a community mental health agency, you may only have so many times with this person, but which is fine. But it's important to know if I have 3 times with this person, I'm not going to try to do deep work, because 3 times is not enough to create the safety necessary to do deep work. So that's not anyone's fault either. It just is what it is. So quick fix that, you know, short-term crisis focused therapy has its place, you know, like let's say that there was like a really big tornado. We're not going to sit here and talk about your childhood. We're going to sit here and try to get you stable so your body is not constantly reliving this. That's great. That's not going to be the only thing necessary forever, but short-term therapy has a place. It's just not always useful when therapists are trying to solve long-term problems with a short-term fix.
That makes sense.
9:55. I've learned 1, 2, 3. I don't know why I don't have a clock here. So 5 minutes before we're booted.
I think it lets you go longer, but like I think there's like a new thing. It lets you go longer, but it's up to you.
We'll find out.
I haven't found a therapist yet, but I believe that they would have have to have the same faith beliefs as me. What do you think?
If that's important to you, then yeah. You know, I don't have the same faith beliefs as everybody with whom I work, but I respect everybody's beliefs and I don't try to impose my agenda on them. So for some people, that's great. And for some people, you know, if someone came to me and said, here's my faith, here's what I believe, I can't work with you unless you believe this, I would tell them, well, I'm not your person. But if that's important to you, then okay, like find a therapist who has the same faith beliefs as you. If that's important to you, then do it.
Makes sense. You speak a lot on narcissism on your page. Can you share what trauma can bring an individual to be a narcissist? That's a great question, actually.
That's a great question. Thank you, Empath Nation. I would love to stay if I could, if Instagram doesn't boot us off. I could probably do another half an hour. So what kinds of traumas can create a narcissist? Well, I can go on for days and hours and weeks, months and years about this. So generally, any kind of trauma can create a narcissist, for one thing, but attachment trauma is really one of the bigger ones. You know, when caregivers are not tuning into the infant's needs, and then this little baby grows up feeling alone in the world. And again, this is not an excuse, it's an explanation, not the same thing. So this little baby grows up and no one has ever tuned to their needs. They have no sense of self, right? A parent's job is to mirror a child's sense of worth, love, and belonging to them. But if there's nobody doing that, then the narcissist has to feed like a parasite on other people for their sense of self. They don't have one. Their self is there. It's just so like locked off and blocked away that they have to attach them. They don't have to. They choose to attach themselves like parasites, and they feed off of people to get resources and fuel. That's a long conversation, but a short answer.
So it would seem that a narcissist would breed other narcissists then.
Yeah. Most narcissists generally have a parent or someone in their family who is also a narcissist. Not always, but sometimes.
So how would somebody, let's say, who's brought up by two narcissistic parents not be narcissistic? Like, what would have to happen for them to...
And it happens. There's lots of awesome people who are raised by not awesome people, and who develop resilience because they're teachers or coaches, or they find really good friends, or their neighbor's mom always makes sure to give them a hug or whatever. So it's really about what are the quality of the relationships. Your parents might suck, but if you have enough supportive people around you, then you're probably not going to become a narcissist.
So as long as there's somebody who's filling that attachment void, then is that what you're saying, that anybody could really fill that void as long as they're...
I wouldn't say anybody, because like mom is mom and dad is dad. But if you're talking about preventing the development of a narcissist, so narcissists don't exhibit the capacity for empathy. They have it, but they don't use it because it was never given to them. It's a muscle that's never been exercised. So if someone has narcissistic parents, but they're being exposed to people who are showing them empathy and love and care and kindness, and they're able to work through that, they're still going to have issues. If you have two narcissists as parents, you're going to have some trouble, but you might not develop full-blown narcissism.
Yeah, so Schwartz Esther said many times children become codependent versus narcissistic.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That's the dance, right?
Because then you're like taking care of your parents because they're both narcissistic.
Exactly.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Good point, Schwartz Esther.
Yeah.
And then Schiffer also said, is it me or my imagination, or are there really many narcissistic people out there? How do you know somebody is narcissistic, or just this is totally off topic, but it's really interesting.
That's okay.
Conversation. But
and here we are back to our everything comes back to, so again, Narcinon is the woman who founded Narcinon, and we're so passionate about this. Like, again, I could talk about this all day, and it does tie into trauma in the body, because if you've ever interacted with a narcissist, you're going to have trauma that will show up in your body. But I lost my train of thought. What was the question?
Oh, so why does it seem like there's so many narcissistic people out there? That's a good point. I was also wondering that. And how would you know if somebody is just narcissistic or if they have a personality disorder?
So narcissism is a continuum, and we all have it to some degree. Everyone has degrees of narcissism in different environments of context. So not everybody is a narcissist. Not everyone has narcissistic personality disorder, but everyone has narcissism to a degree. Are there more narcissists now than there were? I would say probably, just because we have more access to things like cameras and videos and the internet. So that's probably kind of exacerbated the problem. But I think humans forever have had, there have been narcissists throughout history, well documented. So, how to tell if someone has NPD, that's a whole nother talk. We'll do another live about that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so interested in that. Here I thought I was just really interested in trauma, but narcissism sounds really exciting too. I mean, not exciting.
Flavor of trauma.
Sounds traumatizing, but
it's fascinating. Now, I've experienced it firsthand. It's like super not fun to have narcissistic abuse. However, as a clinician, I am fascinated by how it develops and why it develops and how people become attracted to it and how to disentangle and why it's not a personality disorder. It's actually an addiction, and that's a whole nother talk. But
oh wow, we do. Let's book another one. Wow, I'm so interested in that.
Yes.
Where can I read more on the attachment void narcissism, how to prevent raising a narcissistic child?
We'll create a booklet, then we'll get that out there.
Main tips for healing codependency other than self-care and boundaries.
Well, other than self-care and boundaries, well, if boundaries are difficult and self-care is difficult because of codependency, then the first thing that you want to do is trauma work. Because if you can't set boundaries because of the codependency, there is a function to that lack of boundary setting ability. And it's important to learn why is that there and how do we recode your brain so it knows it's no longer necessary.
It's fascinating, the connection. It's really cool.
Yeah. I love, again, if I wasn't so, traumatized by my history, I wouldn't have this as a job. So I don't regret my past. I would not want to relive 1 second of it, but I love getting to just dive into the conversations like these because we have so much power as humans to help ourselves. We have so much power to change our wiring and to change how we show up in the world and to change how we perceive things and how we interpret data. And no one taught us that we're super awesome, powerful, magical beings. And it's really fun to learn this stuff when you realize, wow, my brain can change. No, this is not who I am. I'm not my diagnosis. I'm not my trauma. I'm not the things that have happened to me. I'm actually pretty damn powerful. If you know how the brain works, then I can change my brain. That is really good news. And it's really cool.
That's amazing. And well, that's why education is so important.
Yes.
And, people have to, break the stigma, educate themselves because knowledge is power. And
yes.
And I love that attitude of kind of like taking your adversity and, plowing through the world with the power that you've gained from overcoming it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And everyone has a story. Everyone has a trauma story, or 10 or 30, and everyone has the capacity within them to access the part of us that's never been touched by trauma. And this is what they call an IFS, the self, capital S self. There is a part of us that who we are at our core that is untouched by all the bullshit of life. And when we can access that self, life gets really good really fast. It can. And again, lack of access to resources, systematic injustices, racism, economic insecurity, these things are real problems. So I'm not sitting here being like, once we have access to ourselves, everything is good. I am saying that important to know that this is a piece of the puzzle, and it's a big piece of the puzzle, that once this gets into place, things can be changed.
And if everybody can access that,
right,
then all those other things will kind of fall in. Like if every single person is able to access their best self, then we won't have all of those other things because we're not going to be concerned with like why people are different than us, and push people around because we're insecure. I don't know, like we're not gonna have all those issues
Exactly.
if we can gain that power back.
And working macro, working with the law, working with the big things is important. My work in the world is to do this, is to focus on this one piece. So I'm certainly not saying this is the only way, it's the best way. It's one piece in a very large puzzle. Your work is really important. You highlight all these issues, you do it every Monday. So knowing what's my piece to play, what's my part to play in all of this. So this is mine. So I'm so happy that we
That's
can have
awesome.
a conversation.
I know. Oh my gosh, we really have to do another one.
I know.
There's so much more to say, and there's more questions. So somebody else asked about more book recommendations, but we're gonna we're making the list after.
Yeah.
Explain what narcissism is and how do I know if I am one.
Stay tuned. If you're worried that you are one, you're probably not, but it's worth a look. So we'll do a follow-up one of these on narcissism.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll also share books. Yeah, more books. I'm not narcissistic, just look at me. Living with a narcissist is very traumatizing, yeah. And Human Magnet Syndrome by Ross Rosenberg.
Oh,
that sounds good.
I haven't heard that one either. Awesome.
I feel that some form of narcissism breeds on a communal level. It takes unlearning to find a new way to make real friendships when only narcissistic relationships are modeled. That's an interesting.
It's so true. My narcissism course is 27 videos and 5 hours of content. So once I get that out into the world, we'll do another one of these because it's a big topic and there's a lot to cover and to talk about. There's a lot of misunderstandings about it. So I'm happy to do another one of these to dive into it because it's a big problem.
Wow. I've had what I didn't realize at the time was a narc actually call me a narcissist.
Yeah,
was baffled and so confused. That's what started me on my journey to somebody just said, what's an addiction? So that's for another live, I think.
Thank you, the kosher Contessa.
Hold on. Oh, was married to a narcissist for many years. Being a people pleaser, he latched on to me and I provided his supply. Finally, I got healthy through therapy and divorced him.
Nice.
Which states are you practiced to license in? There were 2, right?
I'm licensed in Kansas and Missouri right now.
Oh, that you mentioned addiction regarding narcissism. That's what she was talking about. So yeah, we're gonna have to elaborate. That's like a whole other thing, right?
That's my little sprinkle. Narcissism is not a personality disorder, it's an addiction. Stay tuned for more on that.
Teaser.
And yes, trauma bonding is real. It is a good topic to cover. And that will definitely come up when we talk about narcissism, for sure.
Do you think eye movement, something therapy is good for PTSD? Yeah, you mentioned EMDR. That's one of the good ones, right? Also develop PTSD from abuse. Good therapy is worth it. Sorry, I'm just scrolling to make sure.
No, you're fine.
This is an awesome program. How can I sign up to these Monday workshops? We go live every Monday at 9. So just show up. You don't have to sign up. And then the recordings are on our YouTube channel. I'm not always successful at recording them. So hopefully I will be tonight. I've messed up quite a few times, but most of the recordings are on YouTube. What else? Thank you so much for this incredible live. This was golden.
Thank you.
Great live. Would you say that it's true that many narcissists tend to end up in positions of power?
Definitely.
Oh, I think you like went ahead of me because I think you said the trauma bonding already. Oh, time zone for lives is Eastern Standard Time. I'm just crying and old. Tell me what you have going on here.
That's it for the questions. Now I'm all caught up finally.
Yeah.
So my biggest takeaway from all of this when it comes to trauma, going back to where we started, is that you are not crazy. Nobody is crazy. Everything makes sense in context. You may not understand what your body is doing or why it's doing it or what the hell is going on, but you are not crazy. Assume your body is doing what it thinks is best to save you. Doesn't mean it's a good thing to keep doing. But if you start with the assumption that you are actually not crazy, that your body is wise and your brain is doing what it knows to do, which is keep you alive, if you start with that as your starting point, then that at least sets us up to go in the right direction. So no shame. Again, I'm not subscribing to every behavior. I am saying assume that your body is trying to help you, not that it's trying to attack you, and not that you're crazy. And that's where we start.
Amazing. So we'll post some book recommendations.
Yes.
And hopefully everyone can gain some tools and be able to to access their intuition.
Yes.
And oh, sorry, somebody just joined now, but you can watch it. It'll be on our story for the next 24 hours.
Thank you for inviting me to do this. I love these talks.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I've been waiting for this one for such a long time.
I know. So much fun.
We booked it like 3 months ago or something. But no, I'm so excited, and we'll have to we'll book about narcissism for another 3 months from now.
That's gonna be a fun one. Let's try to get that in January sometime.
Okay, amazing. All right, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank everybody for being here and for the questions and the conversation and the dialogue. I love that we can do this. It's awesome.
It's amazing. Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Have
Okay.
Bye.